video is sponsored by Squarespace. So this only slightly muddy 200mm f2.8 Lumix Leica lens, full name here because I can't even begin to pronounce it, is largely considered to be one of the best pieces of glass on the entire Micro Four Thirds system, particularly if we're talking sort of super zooms. I took one of my favourite photos with this lens in California last year when I was photographing and videoing some hummingbirds, and I've been dying to take it out for another spin in the UK. So off to the wolves I go. Can you hear that? I hope you can hear that. That's the wolves. I have a selection of lenses. I'm not quite sure how close I'm going to be able to get to the animals. So I thought I would give the Lumix Leica 200mm f2.8 a go. It's a lens I have loved and adored for a long time, but never actually given it a dedicated review. So it shall definitely be featured at some point in this video. How much, who knows? Maybe the wolves will be here. I don't know yet, but I'm very excited to find out, and I shall take you along with me. Oh, what a great time to press record, Emily. So this lens gives you a 400mm full frame equivalent zoom, and it's even more versatile because it has a teleconverter. Usually it comes with a teleconverter, the 1.4, but you can also add the 2x as well. And it's so tiny that I thought I'd lost it when it was actually already on the lens. So it's really, really tiny and pretty convenient to use. I've got to say, having such a long lens at 2.8 is an absolute treat. I have the 100-400, which goes down to 6.3 at the long end, and seeing the 3D pop, as people like to say, I do think it exists, and I do think this Lumix Leica lens has it in abundance. I love the micro contrast with this Leica lens and with basically every other Lumix Leica lens that I've used, to be honest. The absolute clinical sharpness in these lenses is second to none. Now, if you like more character, maybe there are better options. I think the bokeh is quite clinical, and I think, you know, you want something contrasty and sharp if you're looking for a Lumix Leica lens. And I think the longer focal lengths really lend to this characteristic as well, because you're probably shooting animals, for example, where you do want details, details, details. One of my favorite things about this lens is it has a clicky aperture ring, which is lovely, and I tend to pretty much try and use it at 2.8 because I think that's where this lens shines, but you know, you can always just leave it in auto if you prefer. And you do have stabilization built in, so if you have a camera that has in-body stabilization and is capable, you will get dual stabilization with this lens and a applicable body. If you're using a Olympus/OM system equivalent, it won't work, unfortunately. There isn't a cross-compatibility there, and the aperture ring won't work as well, but you can just leave it in auto on the ring and it'll just work as normal. And to be honest, the stabilization in the OM system bodies is more than capable enough for keeping this stabilized without the lens stabilization. The lens weighs a moderately chunky 1,245 grams. You know, there's no getting around that it is a little bit heavy and a little bit chunky. Even comparative to the 100-400, they're pretty much identical, to the point where I often pick the wrong one up off the shelf. But if you consider the zoom that we're getting for this weight and this size, it's pretty decent. There is also a huge lens hood as well. So if you put the lens hood on, which you probably should do, I'm bad at doing it, but you probably should, it helps with contrast and flares. We're getting into pretty large territory here. So here is a size comparison between this and the 100-400 Lumix Leica. And here is a size comparison between the 200mm and the Olympus 40-150. Those are my two longer lenses of choice at the moment, so it gives you a good idea of where this stands in terms of size. And given the size and the weight of this setup and possibly what you want to be shooting with it, I would recommend the larger camera bodies for this setup. So something with a sturdy grip like the OM1 or the G9 II, just because it can be quite a front heavy setup and you want something sturdy in your hands. And really, you probably want the burst modes and the better autofocus systems if you're shooting birds in flight, for example, with this lens. So the whole wolf experience was blooming fun and a bit scary. I really enjoyed it. The 200mm, ironically, ended up being probably a bit too long for this scenario, and my experience with this shoot, I will explain why I think the way I do about the 200mm lens shortly. I actually ended up taking some of my favourite photos from the wolves with the Olympus 40-150 just because of the versatility of it, and I was closer to the wolves than I was anticipating. That lens was just a better fit in that scenario, but I didn't know what to expect until I got there, so I wasn't to know. So what do I think about this lens then, the 200mm lens? I think it comes down to whether you value the aperture and the pin sharpness and the gorgeousness over versatility. Is the 200mm sharper than the 100-400? Yes. A blooming 100 times yes. And you could argue that with the teleconverters, you do get a bit of versatility with the 200mm because you can make it longer. But if you're in a scenario like the wolves, for example, you just can't beat being able to change your zoom manually. And given that the longer lenses are probably geared towards sports and wildlife photographers, having the versatility can sometimes be worth its weight in gold. Now, if you were bougie and had budget and options, I couldn't think of a much better setup in the Micro Four Thirds system anyway than having the 200mm alongside something versatile like the 100-400 and dual wielding two cameras. That way, if your subject ends up in the sweet spot, you know you've got that pin sharp F2.8 Lumix Leica goodness. And then if it doesn't, you've got the versatility to quickly change your zoom to get the composition that you want. But of course, not all of us have that luxury. So it is more of a consideration depending on what kit you have available. And what about the price? The price is often the elephant in the room when it comes to these larger lenses. I kind of headed to eBay and MPB like this when I was researching this lens, but I'm quite happy to say I've found some used copies from £1,000. Some are less, some are more. You will find them between 1,000 and 1,500. So yes, it is a big chunk of change, but it's basically half price to when it first came out, and nothing has changed. It's still an amazing lens. So if you are in the market for something a little bit spenny, but a little bit premium, it is definitely a contender. If this is going to be your only super zoom lens, I would possibly err on the side of caution and get something more versatile, like a standard super zoom, like the 100-400 or the 40-150, for example. So the image quality from this 200mm lens always puts a smile on my face. It's one of those lenses where you just look on the back of your camera before you've done any editing and you can zoom straight in and you can see all the detail straight away. It's just an absolute feat of engineering and such a high quality lens for the current price of it. So what do you make of this lens? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts and feelings are, and what would you buy if you had £1,500/dollars to invest in a zoom lens on the Micro Four Thirds system? Would you go prime or would you go zoom? And in an ideal world, we'd go both. If you enjoyed this video, check out my astrophotography extravaganza video, which was shot at the same place as where the wolves were. I got some really nice star trail photography with the OM1. So if you'd like a pixel peep at some more of my photography using these super zooms, I have some blogs over on my website, which is made by Squarespace, which is a sponsor of today's video. I love Squarespace, and aside from this YouTube channel, which is obviously my baby, my website is my second priority. I love that I have all of these stylish, easy to use features, and I can build a really cool, if I do say so myself, looking website without any technical knowledge whatsoever. So if you have a passion that you would like to share with the world, whether it is photography or something completely different, maybe you are really good at making apple crumble recipes. Whatever it is, whatever you want to pursue suits you, definitely give Squarespace a go. And when you're ready to launch, go to my URL here, which is squarespace.com/microphonenerds, and you can get some money off your first purchase.